Alright, in this video I'm going to go over 10.4, solving quadratic equations. This one we're going to go over two methods. One's going to be graphing and one's going to be solving. So first I want you guys to take a look at the example that's going to pop up on the screen momentarily, and I'm going to ask you guys to find the x-intercepts of the graphs below. So once those appear, we'll take a look, and remember, the x-intercepts are where our graphs cross the x-axis. Another name for this is the zeros of our graphs. Okay, so if we take a look at number 1, we can see that our x-intercept is somewhere in between 1 and 2, and it looks like it's right in between. So I would say that this is at x equals 1/2. And if we look at B, we have two x-intercepts here. One's at -4 and one's at +1. So I write x equals -4 and x equals 1. So when we have the graph in front of us, it's easy to tell where our x-intercepts are. We just look at where they're crossing the x-axis. So basically this page is going to summarize what I just said. We can use the graphs to find our x-intercepts. It's where they cross the x-axis. So something I want to cover here is if a graph never crosses the x-axis, so if it's entirely above or below it, it's never going to have a solution. So we would write no solution in those cases. So if we're given a quadratic equation and we're asked to find our x-intercepts, we can solve by graphing. And this is a very useful tool if you can't exactly look at it and solve it by hand. So to graph, we are going to graph a related function, because quadratic equations are usually, when they want us to find the zeros, they're given to us in the form equals 0 instead of equals y. So the ones that are going to pop up on the screen in a couple of seconds are going to have zeros in them. So if we look at A, it says x squared minus 4 equals 0. To graph this, we just need to simply replace our 0 with a y. So we're going to have y equals x squared minus 4. Same thing with B, it's going to be x squared equals 0, so y equals x squared. Then to graph these, we can graph using either method we learned before. I'm going to pick the chart, since I just don't want to go through those 6 steps. So I'm going to pick 5 values to graph, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Then I'm going to go through and show all my work to show how I get my y values. So if my x value is -2, I'm going to take -2 and plug it in for x. So I'm going to get -2 squared minus 4. -2 squared is 4. So 4 minus 4 equals 0. So I've got my first value. I'm going to do the same thing with -1. -1 squared is 1. 1 minus 4 is -3. Then with my 0, plugging in 0 just makes my x value go completely away. So when we plug in 0, we're going to get -4. And then I'm going to plug in 1. 1 squared minus 4 is 1 minus 4 equals -3. Same deal with 2. I'm going to plug in 2. 2 squared minus 4 equals 4 minus 4 is 0. Then I'm going to go put all my points on the graph, and then I graph. Now that I have my graph, I can look at where my zeros or my x-intercepts are. If I notice, these two in particular are at -2 and +2. So an easier way to write it, instead of writing both x equals 2 and x equals -2, is to write x equals plus minus 2. And the plus minus symbol is just like this. And it means that it's both positive and negative. So with B, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to set up my chart. I'm going to have xy, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. And these ones I'm not going to show my work because I'm just simply squaring the numbers. So -2 squared is 4, -1 squared is 1, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4. Then I'm going to go plot my points on the graph and graph it. Then for this, I only have one place where the graph touches the x-axis, which is at x equals 0. So my solution here is x equals 0. So I'm going to give you guys some practice problems. They're going to appear on the screen. The first one you have is x squared minus 1 equals 0, and the second one you have is 2x squared plus 4 equals 0. So think back to the steps we had before. You can either rewind the video, you can look back at notes you might have been taking, and I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to pause the video if you need to, and then I'll work through the solutions. Okay, so our first thing we do here is we write our related function, which is y equals x squared minus 1. Then I'm going to set up my chart, which is -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Then I'm just going to plug in my values. So -2 squared minus 1 equals 4 minus 1, which is 3. Then I get -1 squared minus 1 is 1 minus 1 equals 0. With 0, I just get rid of the x value and I'm left with -1. Then I'm going to plug in 1 to get 1 squared minus 1 equals 1 minus 1, which is 0. And then same deal with 2. I'm going to plug in 2. 2 squared minus 1 equals 4 minus 1 plus 3, or equals 3. Then I go to graph it. And if you look on this graph, I've got it at -1 and 1 where my zeros are. So my answer here is going to be x equals plus minus 1. With 3, I'm going to set up my related function first, which is y equals 2x squared plus 4. Then I'm going to set up my chart. And with the values -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Then I'm going to plug them into the equation. So I get 2 times -2 squared plus 4 equals 2 times 4 plus 4. Squaring to -2 gives us 4. Then 2 times 4 is 8 plus 4 equals 12. Then I'm going to do the same thing with -1. I'm going to plug it into my equation. Then -1 squared is 1, so I get 2 times 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 4 is 6. Then with my 0, plugging in 0 for x takes away our first term, so we're just left with 4. Then I plug in 1 and 1 squared. And then I get 2 times 1 plus 4 equals 2 plus 4, which is 6. And then finally I plug in 2 to get 2 times 2 squared plus 4 equals 2 times 4 plus 4, which is 8 plus 4, which is equal to 12. Then I'm going to plot my points on the graph and graph them, or connect the points. And then looking at this graph, we can actually see that it never crosses the x-axis, which means there is no solution where plugging in a value will give us 0. So this answer is no solution. No solution means you are still able to graph your function. It just means it's never going to cross the x-axis. Okay. Then moving on, another way to solve for your x-intercepts is to actually solve an equation. So if we have an equation set up and it's set equal to 0, we just use our square roots to solve for the equation. So here's another practice problem that's going to appear on, or this is an example problem I'm going to go through with you. So it's asking us to solve for 2x squared minus 98 equals 0. So we're going to solve this just like a normal problem. We're going to move 98 over to the other side by adding it to both sides. Then we're going to be left with 2x squared equals 98. Then I'm going to divide by 2 to get x squared equals 49. And here's some work off to the side if you're confused as to how I got 49. I just did some long division. Then I take the square root of both sides to get x equals plus minus 7. Because remember, -7 times -7 equals positive 49. And regular 7 times regular 7 equals 49. Okay, so here's some practice problems for you guys to work on. The first one is t squared minus 25 equals 0, and the second is 2g squared plus 32 equals 0. So I'm going to give you guys a couple seconds to pause the video and to work on it on your own. Remember, you can rewind, look at the examples, or you can look at your notes, or just simply pause it. Alright, so with number 5, we're going to add 25 to both sides to get t squared equals 25. Then we're just going to take our square root here. So the square root of both sides gives me t equals plus minus 25. Same deal as before. It's not plus minus 25, it's plus minus 5. Sorry for the mistake. So I can go and fix this really quick for you guys. So it's plus minus 5. The reason it's both plus and minus is because -5 times -5 also results in a positive 25. Moving on to problem 6, we're going to subtract 32 from both sides to get 2g squared equals -32. Then we're going to divide by 2 on both sides to get g squared equals negative 16. So something I want you guys to notice here is we cannot take the square root of a negative number. So because this gives us an undefined answer, our answer here is no solution. So recall when we were looking at the graphs earlier, they simply just didn't cross the x-axis. It's going to be the same deal here. If we notice, our y-intercept on this equation was actually 32, so that shifts the graph way up there, and since it's a positive quadratic function, it means it's never going to curve down, so it's just going to keep going higher and higher. Alright, so these were the notes for 10.4. If you get stuck, you can watch them again, or if you'd like, you can watch this video to review for your quiz and the final.